thought leader, business owner, and educator, 19 Keys is the creator and host of the show High Level Conversations, enjoyed by millions. For the first time, he's touring the country and invoking key conversations about building generational wealth, overcoming trauma, and becoming the best version of yourself.
Man, thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So what can people expect to see and learn from the Highest Level Tour?
It's going to be very transformational. I like to build it as a mind-bending experience. We go to a lot of different events. We go to clubs, we go to concerts, right? We go to a lot of different places, but it's rare that we go to places where we invest our time. A lot of times we're spending our time, meaning that we don't get that time back. We may get a great memory out of it, right? And even sometimes we don't get that, right? But this is not only you're going to get a great memory, you're going to enhance your mind, right? You're going to get a wealth of knowledge and information that you can go apply and use within your life in order to evolve. And so some of the guests that we have will be presenting conversations that are meant to challenge the way you think. But the idea is to create new experiences within a culture in the world that you may want to spend your Thursday or your Saturday night on. Right, but these were ones that made you feel like, I really just went and changed my life for 1.5 or 2 or 3 hours, and then you go back home.
Oftentimes, people are very hesitant to invest in self-development. So they'll buy bottles at the club, or they'll pay very expensive for seats at a concert. Mm-hmm. What do you think enables you to get people to come and invest in themselves and be part of this movement?
Well, I think we challenge people to deprogram themselves and reprogram themselves. If you want something better for your life, you have to do better things, right? A lot of people create goals, but they don't have the right habits, right? Goals doesn't get you to goals. You can have a rich man goal all you want to. If you don't have a rich man habit, you're not going to do the things that set you up to complete that to get to success. So we know that the goals of, everyday frivolous life, those are the goals of distraction. Right? So you have a goal to get to the club, maybe, meet somebody at a bar situation or go out and you have a good time. That's all distraction and enjoyment, right? But what about the things that you say you want for your life, right? I always say, you look at your life right now as your lowest level. And if this is your lowest level, then you have infinite room for improvement. Right? And what we're doing is trying to take people from that low level of consciousness and thinking to a higher level, to where you can, imagine the self-image and you can see a better version of yourself that has more money. Right? I always say, I'm only jealous of my future self. He has everything I want. Right? He's smarter than me, more handsome to me. He has more money than I have. Right? He has the right around network and friends, super healthy, works out all the time. Right? He just does everything right. And so I'm trying to figure out what are those habits that I can do now so that I can become him. And one of them is being in the right environments.
Yeah. What led you up to this? Who is 19 Keys and what was your story like?
I've been through a lot of diverse situations in my life. There's a test you can do called the Adverse Childhood Experience Test. And it lets you know the amount of trauma you had within your life. Mm-hmm. Now, trauma can be good or bad. Some trauma sets people up to make them feel like in order to fill this gap and to heal myself and to be, correct and balanced, I have to overachieve, right? And so some people's trauma and the situations that they go through, whether it's abandonment or having divorce or going to jail or growing up in poverty, right? Whatever it may be, it makes them feel like the only way I can succeed in life is I have to overachieve to even be seen in life. Right? So you develop a rewired attitude towards executing. And then some people, they develop traumas that make them develop coping mechanisms such as drinking, smoking, sex addictions, things of that nature. Right? So I've always had a future-oriented attitude. So I had multiple cases when I was a child, right? Witnessing, violence and toxic environments from, child to adulthood, but at the same time experiencing a discipline that I learned from having a militant, strict household, right? And so if I didn't have that, if I didn't have my parents instill in me a higher thinking of self, I wouldn't have been able to navigate the streets, right, and find myself again. Because you think about the streets and you think about those environments, I talk about the different E's. You have education, that's what you learn, right? You have your environment, which controls the circumference of how you think, right? Because it influences you. And most of us don't realize that environment is stronger than our nature. So we may want to be good, but the environment is constantly programming us to do what the environment is doing, what we see, right? And then we have, of course, our experiences which shape who we are, right? And so when we think about, you know, our life in totality and the decisions that we make, those are our preconditions, right? This is how we were conditioned from when we were a child up until about 25. Yep. And so in order to break out of that, you have to change your habits. And that's what I started to do. So I had my last case at 19 years old and I took it to trial, right? And I remember during that trial, I was reading some books and there was some colorful language in the books. It was like a whole movie script in my head. Yeah. And it was entertaining. But then when I closed the book, I looked around, I'm still in the cell, I'm no closer to my freedom. And my older brother gave me some books to read that would help me engineer my mind, right? To help me develop myself and even understand this case. Because every level of awareness comes with a new language, right? So when you get into wealth and finance, you start to learn new language about stocks and options and assets and how to develop your network, right? And things of that nature. Yep. But when I'm talking about freedom, I have to understand the deception of the system, right? I have to understand my role in it as well. What landed me here and how to not get there ever again.
System that's meant to rehabilitate, they kind of go one of two ways. They either pick up mechanisms to deal with the trauma that they went through, because that's a huge trauma, or they kind of come out more refined in the criminal aspect and everything else. Absolutely. So how do you think that experience shaped your brain and just like the way you were able to see beyond the situation and have hope?
It gave me a sense of self-awareness, right? To know who I am. Like, reminding yourself of who you are is understanding all of your experience and totality make you who you are, right? We have human beings innately sometimes want to self-destruct when things are not going right because they feel like they can just start over and you can't, right? I understood that my experiences made me greater. That there were no losses, there were just lessons. And in those lessons, right, I could consistently improve. So I don't mind making the mistakes, right? Because I know that if I fail fast enough, then I can learn what my peers don't know. I can learn what other people don't know, right? And so I've always, you know, seen things from a future-oriented standpoint. I say, well, it's not that bad. It could be worse, right? And this is like a frequency of positive alignment to say that, you know, as much as I think that things are their worst, I survived every one of my worst moments.
Obviously, you're teaching people how to take that adversity, those obstacles, and overcome it, right? Yeah. So what does that process look like of overcoming trauma? Because a lot of people, they get stuck in that, right? And then, you know, a lot of us have come from difficult backgrounds. Myself, you face, you know, your issues, your adversities, and yet you've been able to turn your life around. But for other people, they get stuck in their environment, in the issues, and they never come out on the other side of it.
You have to face the sombra.
Okay.
Right? The shadow self is what lies underneath what you show the public. Okay. Right? We have this public persona that we show everybody. Right? And this is what we think we need to show up as, you know, the best way to generate the greatest response from the world, how we act, right? Sometimes it can go against who we actually are. We can be introverted, but think we need to show up as an extrovert. Yeah. Right? So every time you meet somebody, right, you're not meeting their shadow self. You're not meeting that kid that went through the trauma. You're not meeting the person that has the insecurities, right? You're not meeting all of the problems. You're meeting their public persona that they show up as, right? And the problem is that you start to believe that's you sometime in that public persona. But the shadow self, right, those conditions of emotions that you felt that you've never got over, those experiences that you felt, they still live within you. And until you face those, right, and become aware of it, you can't truly align who you are, right, with who you're pretending to be. I'm nowhere near perfect. You understand me? I like to say I'm perfectly flawed because I'm always striving to be better. But the best way to do that is to review your childhood, right? So everybody has a childhood type, right? My childhood type was to be the hero. Okay. I felt like I received love by helping others. Right? And so anytime I would show up for others and they would need me, I felt like that was the best way that I was loved, right? You have to understand whether you have abandonment issues, right? You can get that by seeing your parents divorce, right? You can get that through many different circumstances, and then you can start develop attachment issues in that way, right? You can have financial trauma, right? It can be connected to growing up in poor environments, right? You can be in too close proximity to people, right? And you can have spatial issues. But that child that went through that experience, that when you was younger, they never got over that emotion.
Yep.
So sometimes a person talking to you and they talking to that child that been through that hurt, right? But you're presenting as this grown adult, but you're reacting to that child. As that child, because you become re-triggered. So you have to go back in your theater of life, and you have to go back through those situations, and you have to basically kind of rewrite the script. And by understanding that, you can fully integrate yourself and walk within your authentic power.
Well, in our communities, right, the Black community, the Latino community, oftentimes, and mostly for men are taught to numb their feelings, right? To just keep it pushing, not process, and sit in that. So how do you kind of deliver that message to people? Because change is hard, right? Yeah. This process of alignment, people think that, it sounds nice, it sounds pretty, like everybody wants the result, but it's painful and it's hard and it's uncomfortable.
Well, you got to understand that pain is a good thing. Pain is letting you know that you're growing, right? It's a condition of growth. Like when I was younger and I was growing, I distinctly remember getting knee pains. Right, and I thought it was a bad thing until my pops told me, like, nah, that just means that you going through puberty, like you growing, right? And puberty lasts from like 14 to 25. You know what I'm saying? So we're always growing, but when we're growing emotionally, we feel that pain as well, right? But once you are expanded, you can contract. Right, so once your mind is exposed to new ideas, to new things, to new feelings, you can't go back. You can't put that back in the box. You can ignore where you at, but now you have to fill those gaps with this new person that you've become, right? And so for me though, that idea of change, a lot of people do look at change as hard, but I change the narrative that change is good, is necessary. Change is evolution, right? So most people look at, because we fight to protect the person that we've become, especially when we go through trauma, right? Because this is what got us through life. So you telling me I need to change that, now you think that you're gonna feel vulnerable. So human beings fight against any conditions of change, right? If you were born with a different set of parents, in a different household, right? Speaking a different language, you'll be a different person. Even if you have the same biological makeup, that's who you are. Right? But because we're programmed to think the way we do and we react and revolve in traditionalism, we see what our father did, right? He would practice emotional numbing. He never dealt with anything. So how did he cope? He started probably drinking, right? Sometimes we overeat and things of that nature. So for me, one of the best methods is fasting. Fasting lets you know who you are, right? You've been so entrenched in your parent psychology and their traditions so long, you think that's you. The things that you like as food, all of these things, we praise these as traditions, but we don't know some of those things are bad for us, right? Like there was a psychologist by the name of Edward Burnett. Now, you ever ate bacon?
I have.
Right, and breakfast?
I have.
Yeah, so Edward Burnett is the reason you ate bacon and breakfast. Now, he was in the early 1900s, but he was a psychologist that learned from Sigmund Freud, right? And he used that knowledge to understand the dark side of people, right? And how to really manipulate the dark side of people, the dark desires that we have innately, that shadow self that we never regulate, right? That's always there. But what they would do is they would hire him because anytime they wanted to connect a product to a desire, right? They would hire him to create PR campaigns. Right, PR was now a fancy word for propaganda because he felt propaganda was too harsh of a term to use. So what he did was when he wanted to get people to eat more bacon, he came up with a campaign of the hearty breakfast, right? And he connected bacon to health, right? So like the food pyramid was designed by food companies to sell those foods. So we start eating bacon at the breakfast table because of a psychologist that manipulated human desires. Right? And then we loved it. But then it gave us diabetes, high blood pressure, and cancers, and all these other different things that run in the family. But these are traditions that we're going to continue. Right? So it's not until you start taking some of those traditions off the table and you fast and you reset your own habits to say, okay, I can go with the family been doing this whole time and I'll get what the family has always gotten. Or I can change. Right? I can say, I don't want to eat that for breakfast. You eat something different. Now the trajectory of you know, your future family becomes better, instantaneous.
Deep down inside, a lot of people could know that something is right or wrong. If the mass of people tell them that it's correct, they're gonna keep following that, right? So how do you push against that?
You take on the personality of the crowd, right? When there's a mass group of people, there was a test that they did where they call mirror neurons. Like, we mirror everything that we see. So they had a few people on the elevator once you get in, and they intentionally seen that if people face the wrong direction of the elevator door, even though there's no door right there, how will people behave when they stood on the elevator? What do you think happened?
Everybody faced the wrong way?
Right, 9 out of 10 times everybody got on that elevator just because they seen the crowd and they turned around and they faced it and there's no door. It made no sense. Yeah. But we give up our own individual intelligence, right, for the crowd's intelligence, because we don't want to stand out.
In other interviews, you've mentioned that studying aspect of it and the acquiring new knowledge. A lot of people look to other people as a guideline to success, right? They're like, oh, this guy, he made it, he was successful in this, and they try to apply the same exact strategies to get to where he got to. Exactly. So that's where we get to the learning portion, right? So you talk a lot about people identifying what they're good at, what their gifts are, what their innate abilities are, and then using that to achieve their goals, and not just copying like a blueprint that someone else did. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, a lot of people have dreams that's connected to their weaknesses and not their strengths. Because we copy what looks good on someone else, we think it'll work for us. So that goes back to the idea of, you know, habits versus goals. The process versus the results. Yeah. So if I look at your process and I say, well, you're a reporter, right? You work for Telemundo, you know what I'm saying? That I want to do the same thing, right? How can I get started? How can I start interviewing people, right? No, I need to understand what your process was, because right now I'm in love with your results. Right? But if I told you the process of sleepless nights, the anxiety, the stress, the learning, right? You may not think it's so glamorous anymore, right? If you may not like the networking that I have to go through, right? I might have to sit across from people that I don't find interesting, right? And keep a straight face. You might not have that ability to do that. You may not have a natural inquisitive nature, right? So you may want the money that I make from it, the position that I got, right? All of these results. But what about the process? Yeah. The process is what's gonna stop you, right? You know, some of us, you know, we are more in our mind and some of us are in our body, right? Meaning that when you sit down, you can get social anxiety from doing certain things because you're overthinking. Some people don't have that. They can ignore what's going on inside and they just hear, right? Yeah. Those are the more extroverted people. So you have to start looking at, you know, who you are from a custom level and build on your strengths. Right? And build a life around your strengths. And the way you do that is taste testing. You never know what you're good at till you try it.
Where can people get their tickets for?
They can go to 19keys.com. And so we're going to do, I believe it's 13 cities. It's going to be transformational. It's going to be mind-bending because we usually touch on a variety of topics. I am big on self-wars right now. That's my next title of my book, called Self-Wars, and it's about the daily battle and challenges that we face from a spiritual and mental standpoint. And I chiefly believe that we live in a time where we have all the resources, all the technology. We really don't have no excuses. It's not racism, it's not bigotry, it's not sexism. That's our biggest issues right now. It's our own self. It's our own mind that we're fighting to not procrastinate, to focus, right? To get over those, you know, limiting thought processes, right? That lack mindset, that fear-based mindset, that survival mode, that trauma that we have. If we can heal through those, you realize you're living in the greatest time to be alive. All of the technology to bring out any idea and vision that we want. You have to appreciate where you are, but you can't if you got all these issues within self. Right? Because now you're stuck over the world go in, man, I got all this problem. No, get out your way, right? And get into action. So if you can do that and you can have strategies and you can develop a philosophy towards life, now you can win those daily battles. Growing up in Oakland, California, I often envisioned what it was like to have my name on the side of buildings. What it was like for those who owned it. What it was like for those who controlled every single thing that I seen in my environment. You have a mind. Focusing on, number one, giving yourself grace. Give yourself room to fail, right? In the white community, failure is a normal process towards success. In our community, when somebody fails, they're a failure. When they fail, they're scam artists, right? No, If you try anything big, you have to fail big, right? And then when you fail, you learn from it, and you're actually now more experienced and equipped than somebody who hasn't failed. Because now you know what not to do. So you give yourself that grace room to fail. Then you have to forgive yourself. You practice self-forgiveness. You're not holding on to shame where, oh, I feel like I'm evil. That's the lowest emotion. We think when we dislike somebody or we hate somebody, they feel it. You feel it. Yep. You're just conjuring hate inside yourself and making yourself sick, right? So we can be sickening ourselves by thinking about the things we hate, or we can be healing ourselves thinking about the things that we love.